Welcome to the All Things DER podcast, brought to you by AEIC. In this podcast, we dig in, define, and discuss where the new energy economy is heading with electric industry leaders and explore all the ways that distributed energy resources can modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thank you for joining us.
Hi there, welcome to All Things DER podcast, sponsored by AEIC. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Cook, and I am the General Manager of Advanced Grid Solutions at Duquesne Light, as well as the DER Subcommittee Chair here at AEIC. And today, on our episode, we have Deepa Poduval, Senior Vice President, Global Advisory Lead for Black Veatch. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
So, on the podcast, we've been talking a lot about DER at the edge, electrification at the edge. However, not all can be electrified. So do you see, where do you see the additional solutions coming from?
I think that is a very good question. You're right. There's a lot of conversation about the electric grid and the challenges, going all the way from supply through demand and everything in between. But as you rightly pointed out, not everything can be electrified. And so we see a portfolio of technologies playing into solving this sort of generational challenge of energy transition. Hydrogen is very much part of that conversation. It feels like, hydrogen was always like dressed for the party, but there wasn't a party to go to for the longest time. But now, it feels like the time has come. Black Veatch is EPC building the world's largest green hydrogen hub right here in the United States in Delta, Utah.
Just for our listeners, what does green hydrogen mean versus another color of hydrogen?
There's a rainbow of hydrogen colors. Green hydrogen generally refers to hydrogen that is produced by splitting water through a process called electrolysis. And the energy to split the water atom is generally provided from a green source of electricity, such as solar or wind. So that's green, and then, like I said, there's an entire rainbow of colors.
Like blue is gas.
Blue is gas. Pink is nuclear.
Okay.
Gray is coal and dirty.
The mix.
The mix, yes.
Old mix. Okay, so you guys are actively working on a green hydrogen project in, did you say
in Delta, Utah.
Delta, Utah. Okay,
yes,
that's exciting.
Which is like the world's, largest and first green hydrogen hub, and we have others right behind it. So what that's telling me is that, real money is being spent on these projects, right? The investments are happening. We also see a lot of activity around CCUS, carbon capture, in utilization and sequestration. Again, generally from an EPC company's perspective, we get called in to do engineering on a number of novel technologies. Where you really start seeing the turnaround is where you go from those initial pre-feasibility studies, and then a lot of things will just die on that vine. Mm-hmm. But if you see those progress through the project development phases, right, as more and more money then gets into studying whatever the project is, you go from the pre-feasibility to the feasibility, and then you're doing your FEL1, FEL2, your FEED studies. The level of investment increases, and you recognize that the stakeholders are more and more serious. And so we're seeing a number of FEED studies now on the CCUS side, which exciting. Is again an indicator that these projects are real and that they will start to go.
So just the ballpark, they die at the feasibility. So from your experience and just seeing like what kind of volume were you seeing where this was being picked up, being looked at from a utility or a third-party engagement stakeholder to now where we're sitting, just out of curiosity?
Well, we're certainly seeing a number of projects. I don't know how I would quantify it, but there are different profiles of project developers that are looking at this seriously. For example, we see, power plants now exploring the option of capturing the carbon that's produced from the power plants and sequestering it, or finding another use for it through transporting it to where it can be utilized. Again, like I said, we're seeing a number of feeds for these types of technologies in ways that weren't feasible before. And the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, has certainly contributed, I think, to some of that momentum.
I'll just share like a little perspective. Being in the industry for 18 years, I remember sitting in the West Coast with some utilities doing wind interconnection studies, and at that time they were not feasible, were viable, and they weren't going to work.
Yeah.
And then very quickly with solar, then batteries, and now electrification of vehicles, and it seems like the time frame of when all these these technologies come onto the playing field has really shortened.
Yes.
So we're still like learning from our wind, learning from our solar, learning from the batteries, and now here you're saying hydro and carbon content. I mean, it's a very exciting time. Is there any
that
other?
First domino falls, and then it quickly sets the others in motion.
Each domino can push over 50 times the size of the original domino. So
sort of reminds me of ant, and
we're making a
percentage of body weight that can
massive
carry.
Momentum right now is what you're feeling from these feeder studies.
Sustainable aviation fuel is another one. Biofuels, again, recognizing that certain applications do need thermal processes, right? And if you're trying to fly an airplane across oceans, putting a large heavy battery on that plane probably doesn't work as well as it does for some other applications. And so aviation fuel is it's an incredibly important area of focus for airlines, trying to find sustainable sources for that, driven by incentives and penalties that European markets especially have. So again, we're involved in moving to in progressing FEED on a sustainable aviation fuel project for DG Fuels, where one of the large U.S. airlines will be an off-taker.
That's exciting.
Again,
and
those are like the dominoes that are starting to fall.
To be, part of the utility planning world and knowing and hearing how much energy an airplane would need to charge a battery, that takes some of that worry off.
Pressure off.
On top of figuring out how to fly the large battery, but even charging it, that's a significant amount of demand.
Consumer demand for electric vehicles and what that will create, just right here. Yeah.
So good to know. So any other technologies that you can think of?
I think those are sort of the headliners.
The heavy hitters.
Yep.
So I heard you mention the IRA. So Inflation Reduction Act, with the most recent passing of this, how do you see this accelerating the solutions that we just spoke of?
Yeah, like I said, we were starting to see momentum in all of these even before the IRA showed up. But that momentum has significantly increased with the IRA because there are meaningful incentives that, that support each of these that I mentioned. On the hydrogen side, cost has been one of the barriers for economic scalability of some of these solutions. What the IRA does is it creates provisions and incentives up to almost $3 per kilogram of hydrogen, which significantly reduces the cost of hydrogen, which is again generally estimated to be somewhere between $3 and $8 per kilogram. And so if you're able to reduce that by as much as $3, you're really talking about being able to move the needle. So that is one area that we're, that is bolstered by the IRA. Same thing on the CCUS side as well. There are carbon credits that now apply to CCUS. They've been increased, so anywhere between $60 and $85 per metric ton of CO2 that gets captured or redirected also really helps to improve the economics. And on the sustainable aviation fuel side that I mentioned, also there are incentives, like $1.75 per gallon of fuel that's produced, needle movers, all of these.
It's very exciting.
Yep.
So what do you think you'd like the IRA to not solve?
What does the IRA not solve? I think that's a really good question. I would maybe summarize it as sort of the 3 Ps. One, planning, and we talk about this, from where you started this conversation, just with the electric grid and the demands that are placed on it, given the energy transition, given aging infrastructure, given climate adaptation, integrated planning that allows for, all of the generation technologies to be plugged into the grid, but also for these new technologies, if you're talking about hydrogen, that becomes a source of like long-term storage and dispatchable generation. And so having line of sight into what that supply-demand balance looks like and what the infrastructure in the middle needs to be, it feels to me like there's a big planning gap. People are seeing it from their vantage points, but having a holistic view of how all of these things tie together. And so I think that's one, planning is a challenge, just logistically. The second is around permitting, right? Again, you hear about this with every kind of infrastructure that needs to be built, but just because something becomes economically viable or technically feasible doesn't mean that it gets built instantaneously.
Right.
The permitting process is long, it's arduous, it's many times uncoordinated, unpredictable, and it will continue to act as a challenge, as we look to bring on all of this infrastructure that we're talking about.
Experience of building, new transmission infrastructure.
Yes, and transmission is very much a part of, this dialogue. And the third, I would say, the third P is procurement, which is all of the challenges that we're seeing on the supply chain side, right? When you look at hydrogen, for example, the world does not have electrolyzer manufacturing capacity to be able to do, what's projected needs to get done. And that kind of supply chain challenge, I think, shows up, across the board for all of these technologies that are in high demand, that are considered as being critical parts of the solution.
Right, it's all, kind of your idea of the planning perspective, is key, because there is that gap, right? Like, we're putting all of this investment into let's make it happen, but we're forgetting about kind of that transformation and what that looks like, so we need to focus there. And I guess I kind of think of the analogy as to do anything, you have to kind of get in the car and drive. You can't learn driving by being parked.
Yes.
So I think the vision is really creating this economic viability of the big infrastructure that it can be and it exists will trigger or trickle down to creating the awareness of these gaps that you just mentioned.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will say, not to sort of focus on the challenges, and I think those three are three big ones, but the IRA also, really moves the needle, or has the vision of moving the needle on some very important elements outside of just economics, I think, and it's around environmental justice, it's around social equity. A lot of the provisions that are built into the IRA are conditional, or they scale based on paying workers the prevailing wages, based on using apprentices that are part of the registered apprenticeship program that the Department of Labor has. It's based on having projects that are sited in energy communities, which are either brownfield sites, or they're sites that used to be, an oil or coal community, or sites that, where the level of poverty is higher than the national average. So these are, they just outside of even, how do you do the math as, as engineers or scientists on how do you supply, how do you balance supply and demand and build all the infrastructure between them. Being able to create incentives that drive the right behaviors and help to balance, where there is imbalance, and bring justice, where that's sorely needed. It's definitely another positive, and it's sort of an uplifting aspect, I think, of the IRA.
Right. Create some hope. I have to say, the whole idea of plus one, right? You take those small steps and in the right direction. So
Yes.
the vision's there, the infrastructure and the awareness, right? We can all kind of walk that journey together. So anything else you want to add? We'll pause.
No, I think we covered it.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna wrap up. Okay. Well, it's definitely a very exciting future, and on top of all things DER, we have this whole other dynamic that you've introduced, and I think it's, there's great synergies to it, but also we have to keep our eye on the ball of all of these new technologies that are coming at us to make this difference and this change in our future. So thank you for attending this podcast.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure. And here's to us solving these problems together.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And we've all, I think, recognized and espoused sort of that all of the above, right? It's going to take more than one answer, more than one silver bullet. And so it's an exciting time.
Very exciting.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of All Things DER. Thanks for tuning in. We hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode soon. Until then, keep powering on.